Hey there, curious minds. Welcome to our corner of knowledge. Today we're taking a trip back in time to an era of castles and samurai deserts and cathedrals. But we're not looking for kings or battles. Instead, we're searching for something far more intimate, something that connected all people, no matter where they lived. Have you ever wondered how people declared their love, their rage, or their melancholy before radio songs or internet playlists existed? The answer is deeper and more universal than you might imagine. They used a secret code, a language everyone shared, poetry. Today we're going to decipher the secret code of the medieval heart together. We'll explore how a knight in France, a mystic in Persia, a noblewoman in Japan, and a student in Al-Andalus felt and expressed emotions in surprisingly parallel ways. Get ready, because history is full of whispers. Before we dive in, I wanted to tell you a bit about the visuals you're seeing. To bring this narrative to life, I've used AI tools to generate the images. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of what I'm sharing with you. I hope you enjoy it. First, let's consider the court. The power, the luxury, the strict rules. In medieval Europe, troubadours were the rock stars of their age. They sang about courtly love, a fascinating concept. It was an idealized, almost unattainable love directed at a noble lady, often married. The poet presented himself as her vassal, her loyal servant. The troubadour suffered, yearned, and rejoiced in his secret devotion. His poetry was a dance of glances, of hidden messages and metaphors, of a love that found its ultimate expression in distance and sacrifice. It was a way to channel passions within a rigid social environment filled with prohibitions. Now let's journey thousands of miles east to the heart of the Persian Empire. Here in the gardens of Shiraz or Isfahan, we find poets like Hafez and Rumi. Their language was also one of longing and devotion, but with a completely new dimension, one that uniquely fused the earthly with the divine. Persian poetry, especially in its form called ghazal, speaks of the beloved, but this beloved is ambiguous. Is it a person of flesh and blood, or is it God himself? The wine they mention, is it the intoxicating drink, or is it spiritual ecstasy? This duality is key. Human love was a reflection, a path towards divine love. In Europe, love was a form of vassalage. In Persia, it was a mirror of the universe. Two forms of court, two forms of longing, one directed at an earthly lady, the other at a beauty that transcended the physical world. Yet in both, the poet is a seeker, a soul that suffers and soars through their verses. Now let's cross over to another world, Hei in Japan, between the 8th and 12th centuries. In the imperial court of Kyoto, poetry wasn't a mere pastime. It was an essential communication tool, a pillar of social life. A noble without poetic skill was considered incomplete, almost a barbarian. Here, the preferred form was the waka or tanka, a short poem of 31 syllables. Unlike the passionate lament of the troubadour or the mystic quest of the Persian, Japanese court poetry focused on subtlety, the ephemeral beauty of nature, and contained emotions. A poem could be a message of love, a note of thanks, or a political dagger. Allusion and suggestion were highly valued. The image of a solitary deer might speak of melancholy, or dew on a leaf might describe the fleeting nature of life. It was a code of utmost elegance and emotional depth. So we have three worlds of the court: the feudal service of love in Europe, the mystical fusion of love in Persia, and subtle communication through nature in Japan. Three elites, three ways of refining emotions. But what happened beyond the palace walls? What was happening on the streets? Now let's descend to the taverns, the marketplaces, the dusty roads. Here, poetry sheds its courtly mask and speaks with a more direct, more visceral, and often far more rebellious voice. In medieval Europe, Goliards were wandering clerics and students who had abandoned academic life. Their Latin-written poetry didn't sing of unattainable ladies. It sang of life's pleasures, wine, gambling, physical love, and most notably, fierce criticism against the hypocrisy of the church and power. The famous collection Carmina Burana is the prime example of this vibrant and satirical movement. Meanwhile, on the Iberian Peninsula, in the territory known as Al-Andalus, street poetry flourished in a unique and blended way. Here, Arab, Jewish, and Christian cultures coexisted. From this mix, a poetic form called Zajel was born, distinct from classical Arabic poetry. Zajel was written in the local dialect, not classical Arabic, and often incorporated words from the Romance languages spoken by Christians. It was the voice of the people. Its themes were love, wine, everyday life. It was poetry made to be sung and danced in the marketplaces, much freer and more direct. Notice the parallel. Both the European Goliards and the Al-Andalusian Zajel poets used poetry as a tool for popular expression. They broke away from the formal language of the elite and spoke in the language of the street. They celebrated worldly pleasures and weren't afraid to criticize the powerful. And what about Japan? Was there a popular voice there? Absolutely. While the court obsessed over subtlety, more popular poetic forms emerged, often tied to festivals and the lives of wandering monks. These were poems that spoke of the hardships of labor, the simple beauty of the countryside. They lacked the elegance of a courtly waka, but they possessed an overwhelming honesty and power. They were the necessary counterpoint, proof that the need to express oneself through rhythm and word didn't belong to a single social class. It was everywhere, like an undercurrent. So we have a map. At the summit, court poetry, sophisticated, codified, often an instrument of power and social status. Below, at the base, street poetry, direct, vital, sometimes subversive, connected to real life and the everyday pleasures and pains. But here's the twist, the true secret. Despite their differences in form, language, and status, all this poetry spoke of the same thing. The human heart didn't distinguish between a palace and a tavern. Longing felt the same in France as it did in Persia. A troubadour's lament for his distant lady isn't so different from the Persian mystics longing for their divine beloved. Both speak of an absence, of a desire that consumes and defines the poet. It's the same emotion, dressed in different cultural garments, but with the same ardent core. The subtle description of a Japanese noblewoman's sadness upon seeing a falling blossom, isn't that a form of melancholy that an Al-Andalusian poet might also feel when recalling a lost love? The form is different, one is contained, the other is expansive, but the emotion is an echo, a resonance across continents. And a Goliard's song celebrating wine isn't so far removed from a Zeyjel that celebrates the joy of a festival. Both are a toast to life, a reminder that amidst difficulties and hierarchies, the pursuit of joy is a fundamental human drive, an act of small rebellion. This is the secret code. It wasn't in the exact words nor in the rules of meter. The code was human experience itself. Poetry was simply the vehicle, the technology that the Middle Ages developed to encapsulate, preserve, and transmit those universal feelings. It was a way of saying, I feel that way too. It was a bridge between one soul and another, whether in the same room or across centuries. It shows us that despite the barriers of geography and time, the language of the heart has been surprisingly consistent. The next time you hear a love song or a protest song, remember the troubadours, the Persian mystics, the noble women of Kyoto, and the Goliards. You are part of a millennia-old tradition, that of using the art of words to navigate the complex and wondrous labyrinth of being human. Poetry, both courtly and street level, teaches us that social and cultural divisions are, in many respects, superficial. Beneath it all, we share the same questions, the same longings, and the same joys. The secret code of the medieval heart still beats today. So, we've seen how European courtly love idealized the lady, creating a game of service and devotion. This model not only entertained, but also established a social and emotional order within the elite. Poetry was, in this instance, a form of social engineering, a way to manage passions. On the other hand, Persian mystical poetry sought the dissolution of the self. While the troubadour aimed to serve his beloved, the Sufi poet wished to merge with the divine beloved. It's a completely opposite direction. One seeks to define oneself through service, the other seeks to erase oneself through union. In Japan, court poetry was an exercise in perception. The key wasn't to express emotion directly, but to find the perfect image in nature to evoke it. It was a training in sensitivity, in seeing greatness in the small, a concept known as mono no aware, the awareness of the ephemeral. These three elite poetic visions show us three ways of understanding the world. The European focused on social structure, the Persian focused on spiritual transcendence, and the Japanese focused on aesthetic perception and connection with nature. They are three universes unto themselves. Now let's return to the streets. The Goliards' poetry was an explosion of individualism in a very corporate era. By criticizing the church, they weren't just seeking a laugh, they were asserting their own intellect and their right to judge institutions. It was the voice of critical thinking, being born in the taverns. In Al-Andalus, the Zeyjel was a celebration of cultural blending. Mixing Arabic and Romance languages in a poem wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a reflection of their reality. It was a declaration that identity wasn't pure, but a beautiful mix of influences. It was the poetry of the borderland world. This popular poetry, in all its forms, functioned as a pressure release valve. It allowed common people to process their frustrations, celebrate their joys, and most importantly, create a collective identity outside the official culture imposed by kings, nobles, and the high clergy. The true genius of the poetic code is its adaptability. The same emotion, unrequited love for instance, could be a suffering sonnet in the court, a subtle lament in Japan, or a drunken song of scorn and heartbreak in a Goliardic tavern. The emotion is the same, the cultural software is what changes. Think of it this way. The court used poetry to build and maintain order. The street used poetry to challenge it or to create an alternative order, one based on community and shared experience. They were two sides of the same coin, two functions of the same powerful art. Even the physical form of poetry was distinct. In the court, it was often a luxury item, an illuminated manuscript, a leather-bound book. In the street, it was ephemeral. It lived in memory, in song, passed down by word of mouth. It didn't need a physical medium to exist and be powerful. Court poetry aspired to permanence, to be remembered as a work of art. Popular poetry aspired to immediacy, to connect in the moment, to make people sing and feel together. One sought immortality, the other sought the vitality of the present moment. This tension between the refined and the popular, between the permanent and the ephemeral, is what made the Middle Ages such a poetically rich era. It wasn't a monolithic world, but a chorus of thousands of voices, each singing its own song, yet often in an unexpected and surprising harmony. For instance, a troubadour might sing to his lady, "I die of love for you." And this was hyperbole, a literary device within the courtly game. It was a symbolic death. The poet poetically surrendered to an overwhelming love, thus demonstrating the refinement of his feelings and his unwavering loyalty. A street poet, on the other hand, might sing about death in a much rawer, more realistic way. A Goliard might write a poem about how life is short and death, depicted as a skeleton, stalks us all, so we might as well drink and enjoy ourselves now. The same word death, but with opposing meanings. In Japan, death was approached through nature. The falling cherry blossoms were the quintessential symbol of beauty and the transience of life. It wasn't a tragic death or a mocking death, but a melancholic death, a natural and beautiful part of the cycle of existence. And in Sufi Persia, death was the mystic's ultimate goal. Die before you die meant annihilating the ego, the separate self, to unite with the totality of existence, with God. It was a voluntary and joyful death, the ultimate spiritual aspiration, a very profound and challenging concept. 4 cultures, 4 ways to poeticize a concept as universal as death. Service, mockery, melancholy, and transcendence? This reveals that poetry not only expresses emotions, but also shapes them. It teaches us how to feel according to the values of our culture. This is crucial. Medieval poetry wasn't just a mirror of society, it was also a hammer that forged it. By repeating and refining certain themes and forms, poetry established what was desirable, what was honorable, and what was taboo. It held immense normative power. Courtly love taught nobles to control their impulses. Japanese poetry taught the court to value subtlety. Sufi poetry guided spiritual seekers. And Goliardic poetry created a space for intellectual dissent and camaraderie. That's why studying these poetic forms isn't just a literary exercise. It's a direct window into the operating system of these cultures. It allows us to understand how they thought, what they valued, and how they constructed their reality through language in an intimate and profound way. The secret code, then, has 2 levels. The first is universal, the human emotions we all share. The second is cultural. It shows us the infinite and fascinating ways those emotions can be interpreted, channeled, and expressed. The next time you read a medieval poem, don't just see it as an ancient text. Look at it as a fossilized feeling, a piece of emotional technology reaching us from the past, a device designed to provoke a specific response in the heart of its listener. Musicality was key. We mustn't forget that most of this lyric poetry wasn't meant to be read silently, but to be sung or recited aloud. Rhythm and melody were an integral part of the message, reinforcing the emotion the poet wanted to convey. Imagine a troubadour in a court, his voice echoing through the stone hall, or a group of students singing in unison in a noisy tavern, or a Persian reciter captivating his audience in a garden. Poetry was a social event, a shared experience that united the community. Even in Japan, where writing was so central, the exchange of poems was a performative act. The choice of paper, the ink color, the calligraphy, and even the tree branch to which the poem was tied, all were part of a nonverbal communication that enriched the meaning. This oral and performative dimension is what we often lose in modern reading. But it's essential to understand the impact these verses had. They weren't just words on a page, they were vibrations in the air, designed to enter through the ear and resonate directly in the soul. Court poetry, with its complex rules and refined language, was also a form of distinction. Knowing how to compose and appreciate this type of poetry was a mark of belonging to the elite. It was cultural capital that separated nobles from commoners, an invisible yet very real wall. In contrast, popular poetry was inclusive by nature. Its forms were simpler, its themes more recognizable, and its language was that of everyone. Its goal wasn't to exclude, but to unite, to create a feeling of us versus them, the powerful who lived in their castles and palaces. Thus, poetry becomes a symbolic battleground. a place where identities are negotiated, values are affirmed, and power structures are challenged. It's not a mere ornament of history, but one of its engines, an active force that helps shape the social world. The next time you think of the Middle Ages, don't just imagine a world of violence and darkness. Imagine instead a world full of nuance, of deep reflections on love, life, and divinity. A world where the right words had the power to change the perception of reality. The troubadour Bernard de Ventadorn sang about how the lark rises towards the sun out of the joy of loving. It's an image of pure euphoria, a celebration of how love can make us feel like we're flying. An emotion that surely we've all felt at some point, regardless of the era. Rumi, the Persian mystic, wrote, "The lover does not exist, only the beloved exists." It's a phrase that makes you pause. An invitation to dissolve the ego and understand love not as a possession, but as a universal force of which we are a part. A radically different thought. Ono no Kamachi, one of Japan's greatest court poets, wrote about how the color of the flowers has faded while she futilely watched her life pass by. It's an image of desolate beauty that links personal aging with the cycle of nature. And the arch-poet and anonymous Goliard wrote, "My intention is to die in the tavern so that there may be wine near my mouth when I die." It's a hedonistic and defiant declaration of principles. A mockery of the solemn preparations for death preached by the church. These four distinct voices show us the incredible breadth of the medieval poetic register, from euphoria to mysticism, from melancholy to rebellion. Poetry was the space where all these attitudes towards life could be explored, distilled, and shared with others. It's fascinating to think that in the same era when cathedrals were built to last 1,000 years, popular poems were also created, designed to last just one night of revelry. Both are human creations, both are responses to the same need to leave a mark, to say, "We were here." Court poetry was like the architecture of those cathedrals, complex, structured, designed to inspire awe and reverence towards a higher order, whether social or divine. Every word was in its place, like every stone in the building, fulfilling a specific function. Street poetry, on the other hand, was like the music of a wooden flute played by the fire. Simple in form, yet capable of conveying a direct and powerful emotion, it didn't need grand structures to move people, just a sincere melody and a rhythm that invited participation. The incredible thing is that today we can access both worlds. We can read the refined verses of a Japanese noble, and the next moment, the cheeky song of a drunken student in Germany. Literature gives us privileged access to the totality of human experience from an era. The climax of all this, the great revelation, is that the division between court and street is ultimately an illusion when it comes to the core of emotion. A king felt the pain of loss, just like a peasant. The difference wasn't in the feeling itself, but in the tools each had to express it. Poetry was that tool. For the court, it was a precision tool, a scalpel to dissect and refine sentiment. For the street, it was a tool of force, a hammer to strike and make oneself heard. But both sought to shape that universal raw material which is human emotion. So the next time you feel a strong emotion, think of the medieval poet within you. How would you express it? With the subtlety of a Japanese waka, the longing of a troubadour, the mystical passion of a Sufi, or the brutal honesty of a Goliard? Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, finding a language for our inner world. And medieval poets from all cultures and social classes were masters in that quest. They left us a map, a catalog of possibilities to continue exploring what it means to feel. The secret code of the medieval heart isn't a mathematical formula. It's the realization that beneath the diversity of cultural forms beats a common pulse, a shared rhythm that connects us to them and, more importantly, connects us to ourselves in the present. Understanding this is understanding that the history of literature isn't just a simple succession of authors and works. It's the history of human consciousness, its continuous effort to understand itself and to find beauty even in the most challenging times, a legacy of immeasurable richness. Poetry was their internet, their social network, their way of making a feeling go viral. A good poem could cross borders, be translated, adapted, and sung in places far from its origin. It was proof that a well-expressed emotion is the most contagious message of all. From the idealized love of the troubadours to the life celebration of the Goliards, from Japan's aesthetic melancholy to the divine quest in Persia, medieval poetry was a mirror of all facets of human experience. A mirror that still reflects ourselves back to us today. We've journeyed through courts and streets, crossed deserts and seas. We've listened to the whispers of lovers, mystics, and rebels. And we've discovered that their secret language isn't so secret after all. It's the language we all speak when we truly feel. The code of the medieval heart is simply the code of the human heart, unadorned. It reminds us that, although our technologies and societies change, the fundamental questions about love, life, death, and longing remain intact, waiting to be clothed in the words of each new generation. and that's the beauty and importance of continuing to explore these ancient texts. Not to dwell in the past, but to better understand our present and to realize that we are part of a very long conversation, one that began thousands of years ago and still isn't over. I hope this journey through medieval poetry has been as fascinating for you as it was for me. It's an inexhaustible universe that demonstrates the incredible creativity and profound sensitivity of our ancestors. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me in this decipherment. If you enjoyed this video, if it made you think or feel something, the best way to support our work is by hitting that subscribe button. It immensely helps us continue creating content like this, exploring the most fascinating corners of history and culture. And now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments, what song or poem from our era do you think will still be studied 500 years from now as a reflection of our time? What is the code of our own modern heart? The discussion is open.